What is it about pine trees in Michigan? We have three different kinds. We have the eastern white pine, we have red pine, and we have jack pine. They're all beautiful trees, but none of them seem to have the characteristics that get people all excited about growing them as bonsai. How many public collections have a red pine? Pinus resinosa, our North American red pine? Zero that I know of. How many public collections have jack pine, which is Pinus banksiana? None, zero. I don't know of any. How many have eastern white pine? One. It's a different answer. There is one eastern white pine that I know about. It's on display periodically at the Chicago Botanic Gardens as part of their collection. It's an interesting tree. It doesn't really do a lot for me, but they're at least keeping it alive. Many years ago, in fact, probably close to 40 years ago, I was at a bonsai meeting of the Ann Arbor Bonsai Society, and we had our regular show and tell. And a wonderful gentleman named Dean Atkinson, who's been gone for many, many years, brought an eastern white pine, Pinus strobus, into the Ann Arbor Bonsai Society meeting. It didn't look like a whole lot, but it was a good start on a bonsai, I thought. Anyway, when he showed it to the group, there were a number of criticisms, and people stated quite loudly that you cannot grow Pinus strobus as a bonsai. And Dean's reaction was he gave it away. I never saw it again, and like I said, I haven't seen a white pine really growing in anyone's collection for a long time. All right, what is wrong with white pine? Well, I'll tell you that there are a number of things that are wrong. One of them is that they tend to grow perfectly straight. They tend to grow in sand, which means that the roots run forever, and it's very difficult to capture the small feeder roots that you need with a collected tree. The bark is very smooth. The internodes, the distance between where the new candle will open and where the first needles will grow can be several inches. And it's only a single flush pine, so you can't cut off the buds. Nothing good will happen. You have to grow it and use various techniques to encourage internal budding that do not involve the simple removal of candles. Another problem with white pine is simply the needle length. They're long needles, and maybe not quite as long as some of the trees that are successfully grown as bonsai, but they're long, and it's just one of many things that make the eastern white pine unattractive to people. So a few years ago, I found a white pine that broke all the rules. I was out driving around on logging roads near where I live, which I often do. You find many interesting things, interesting trees, interesting plants, and it really jumped out at me. Here was a white pine among many other white pines, but this one was different. It was shorter, smaller, denser, had shorter needles, was darker in color. And so I stopped my car, I got out, I looked at it, I confirmed it was a white pine, and I'd been hoping to grow one as a bonsai for many years. So I stopped, and there it was. I was able to verify everything, and unfortunately, I had no tools with me. I couldn't dig it up, so I drove away thinking that I would remember where it was. Well, I didn't remember. It was a colossal failure. I should have marked it on my map or something, but when I drove back to where I thought it was, I couldn't find it. And in fact, I couldn't even find anything that I recognized from my previous trip out there. And I ended up I got an app which allowed me to trace my tracks through these logging roads so that I wouldn't have to cover the same ground twice. And then I drove over a period of, many months, over a 2-year period. I probably covered 150 miles of logging roads, and then there it was. So I went from having no white pine to having 3 white pine. In addition to finding this marvelous white pine with the short, dense needles, I had 2 white pine growing on my beach, one of which nearly got decimated by the deer. And so I dug that up really to save its life, and it also had some interest in the trunk, and we're going to end up wiring that one too. And then there's one that just was a very contorted, literati kind of thing. I would have never dug it to make a bonsai out of it because it was a white pine. But we had to have a well drilled, and it turns out the drilling truck wanted to drive right over the pine. I said, give me a minute. I yanked the thing out and put it in a pot, and all of a sudden I've gone from having none of a sketchy species of tree to work on as bonsai. Suddenly I have 3 of them. So what I'm doing today, what I'm working on now, is styling the one that I think is the best one. This is the one that I spent years looking for, and maybe I'll get some wire on the other ones. All 3 of them have issues. I think it's possible that the really nice one with the dense needles, I think it's possible that there's some kind of disease or something that is causing this condition. It's a strange disease if it is, because it really looks beautiful. The one that the deer almost killed turns out to I overwatered it, so it's got nasty looking needles, but it's small and young, and I think I can style it as a bonsai. I love the way these things smell. They smell fresh, vegetal, citrusy, conifery. I mean, I don't know how to describe it, but if you've never worked on a white pine, you might want to work on one just for the smell. There's no problem wiring these things in the wintertime. I've heard so many ridiculous claims about this. It's just kind of amazing. One of the most ridiculous is that the wire will somehow become super cold and freeze off the branches, which is, of course, ridiculous because if you know, both copper and aluminum are amazing conductors, so they're going to find the exact ambient temperature, and they're not going to affect the temperature of the branch at all. The other thing I've heard is that during the wintertime, if you bend a branch, you're going to tear the cambium, and the cambium is not going to be able to heal itself. And of course, this is complete nonsense. If you live in a place like Michigan where we have snow, you know the snow actually happens in the wintertime. And with conifers, with these huge pads of foliage on these branches, they capture the snow, and the branches get bent at very extreme angles, often springing back immediately, sometimes hanging downward for weeks at a time. And if you notice in the spring, the forest doesn't die just because it snowed and some branches got bent. In fact, nothing happens that's bad. As I said before, white pine are vertical growers, and so you'll see white pine in dense forests where they're all 60, 80, 100, 120 feet tall. When you see an individual tree, white pine have a very unusual and I think spectacular profile. And the way that it comes about is that branches grow to different lengths before they slow way down. And you end up with an asymmetric pattern of branches spreading out. Some might be very short, some might be very long, and you end up with kind of an irregular conical shape, typically a very narrow one. And I've got to say, if I am a fan of anything in bonsai, it is designing bonsai that are indications, or they are designed in such a way so that they really talk to the species. So one of the things about white pine that I really love is if you look at the profile of an adult tree, ideally one standing by itself so you can see it from different angles, there's not a regular branching pattern. It grows in whorls, meaning that a series of buds will all come out from the same place around a central stem. But what happens over time as they age is certain branches take over. They get longer and wider. Some get snapped off. And so when you're looking at the profile of an adult white pine, what you're looking at is typically something that is tall and narrow and irregular. And irregular in a very beautiful way. So if I have the ability to do so, what I want to do is I want to make this white pine look like a white pine in nature. So there's nothing wrong with styling bonsai so that they're entirely sculptural. Yes, we find these small trees and sometimes they're all contorted. They don't look anything like an adult of their species would look in nature, and that's fine. But when you do have the opportunity to make a tree that really looks like it's supposed to look, I think that's pretty special. So I'm not making an instant bonsai. There's really no such thing. I mean, people see demonstrations and they think, oh my God, it's so fantastic. Look what this guy has done. Here we have a complete bonsai. An hour ago it was just a piece of material and now it's a bonsai. Well, I got to tell you, that's just not the way it works. What we do during the course of our relationship with each bonsai tree is we take it through various stages. And obviously stage 0 is it's growing in the ground and we've never seen it, and then we collect it, and as a first stage, we get it into decent enough health so that we can do something to it, work on it, help it along. But then the next step after that, once we have the tree in good enough health so that we can safely bend branches and things like that, then we're going to do what we call set the structure. And setting the structure is something that bonsai growers will talk about. It's basically doing the heavy lifting that you'll need to do to define the future shape of a bonsai. I always feel like I owe everyone a disclaimer of sorts because I'm not a bonsai professional. I have never studied in Japan. I really haven't done the things. Well, I was very active in the United States at a time when there was really very little bonsai knowledge. But beyond that, I don't have the qualifications. I'm not a professional. There are bonsai people out there, and I'll just mention a couple, who really know what they're doing. And if what you want is a source of useful information, maybe you should be going to them rather than me. But I will say that Bjorn Bjorholm, Michael Hagedorn, Ryan Neal, people like this, they've really dived into bonsai in a way that I never did, and they're professionals. They've studied in Japan. In fact, all of them have spent years in Japan. What amazes me, though, is just really recently I've discovered dozens of channels on YouTube about bonsai, and the vast majority of them are by people who don't know anything at all about the topic. It's kind of unbelievable, and I'm not going to point to any of them, but I think you might be able to tell who they are. Anyway, I don't understand why it is that people are so anxious to share knowledge that they don't have. If you're watching this video, you must be interested in bonsai, but you're obviously not doing it, or you wouldn't be watching this. What I want to suggest to you is you might learn something from me. It's always possible. But if you really want to grow bonsai, and that's why you're watching this, you're trying to learn about bonsai, you need to spend less time on YouTube and more time with people locally who are also practicing bonsai. So look for your bonsai club, find your local club, join your club. You might not be a joiner. I never was, but I joined a club, and it was really worthwhile. So I want you to do the same thing. So I used to travel all over the country. I did a lot of demonstrations, taught a lot of workshops for clubs. I've seen a lot of bonsai. I've seen a lot of small trees in pots in people's backyards. And I can tell you, if you really want to practice bonsai, first of all, I want you to set your sights on spectacular trees, really spectacular bonsai, and that's what you should try to do. Don't try to do a little twig in a pot. Maybe in the beginning it's useful to do that to learn something, but if you're going to practice bonsai, I think you need to be working on trees that actually could become beautiful bonsai. And there's only one difference that I have observed between bonsai professionals and serious bonsai practitioners who don't really quite get there, and that is stick-to-itiveness. That is focus. It is the willingness to spend a lot of time doing very little. And if you think about it, it is quite different to see a dead wood feature and stare at it and think, this is perfect. This must have happened in nature. The bonsai grower could not have done this. And then you find out that, in fact, they did. So bonsai, it's about concentration, it's about focus, it's about commitment, it's about, like I said, doing a lot, but doing a lot over a long period of time, where each time you're only doing a little. It's often said that the apex is the most difficult part of a tree to build. And part of this is because people are always looking for a dense, rounded apex. And that's not necessarily the way trees grow. It's certainly not the way white pine grows. You can find a white pine that's 300 years old, 400 years old, and it is going to come to a narrow top where you can distinguish individual branches. That's just the way they grow, and so that's what I'm going to try to do is give more of an indication of a white pine top than the rounded, dense top that we see so frequently with bonsai.